In this video, I will explain you the theory behind concept map and how to build them in order to help you when concept maps are part of your assignments. I would also like you to realize that concept maps are also helpful as a learning tool in general, and that you can apply it to many aspects of your curricula as a student. So concept maps are actually an efficient visual tool, and this can help you to memorize the relationships between parts of an overall topic. And so in a concept map, the concepts are represented with boxes, and the links between concepts are represented with arrows between boxes. The classic concept map is organized vertically, with the more important concept on top and the children concepts on the bottom. However, this is how it was started historically, but it doesn't have to always be the same or even the best way to organize them. So there can be more innovative concept map that can be organized differently, and I encourage you to do so because they are more engaging to look at. But in all the cases, what is important for concept map is that concepts are indicated by boxes, the links as arrows, and of course you can also use colors, different shapes, subregions in your map. But if you use this type of things, then this requires a legend in order to help the reader through the map. So there are different structural types of concept maps, and they depend on how the links are organized between the concepts. So there are three types mostly: the spoke, the chain, and the net, which according to me is the best structural type that you could use. So the spoke is the one on the top left here in this example, and this is basically there is no cross-link connection, so they are all the links are all related to the main topic, so it only focuses on the core concept. So here, for example, it will be the core concept will be the flowers, and all the other concepts, they are all related to the flowers, but we don't necessarily know the relationship between these sub-concepts. So we know that flowers produce seeds, that flowers have female parts, that flowers produce pollen, that flowers have male parts, that flowers attract insects, and that flowers produce nectar. But for example, we don't necessarily know the relationship between pollen and male parts. Another possibility to organize your concept map is like a chain, so it's basically linear links within all the concepts in your map, and this focuses generally on only one aspect. So if we focus on the map on the right, we can see that flowers attract insects with nectar in order to transfer pollen from the male parts to the female parts that are called ovules, and they form seeds. So this is a very linear structure. So the best structure to organize a concept map, according to me, is actually the net structure, and because there is a lot of, potentially a lot of cross-link connections, and this can help you show that you have a deeper understanding of a topic. So in this case, on the bottom left part of the graph, we see that flowers, they can attract insects, that they have male parts and that they have female parts. But we also more things, like for example, these female parts actually they are called ovules, and when these ovules develop, they will develop into seeds. And when do they develop into seeds? When actually pollen is transferred to the ovules. And this pollen is produced by the male parts, and then afterwards, so we know that the flowers were attracting insects, and these insects they feed on nectar, and they pick up pollen. So here is another example of a concept map about concept map actually. So let's try to see if this concept map can be classified as a concept map according to what we have seen so far. So the main topic is on top, so that's a good indication that it's a classical concept map. All the concepts are in boxes, and that the arrows are linking the concept with a label. So if we go through this concept map, we can see that the concept map is a hierarchical diagram comprising concepts written in boxes. And this concept map is also showing your knowledge and your understanding. And we can see again on the left, for example, that the concepts are related by links. And these links, they also explain your understanding. So the concept maps were originally developed as a meaningful learning tool, because there is actually a real focus on the understanding of the relationships that you have seen in a course or by yourself. And this is promoting integration of new knowledge. This is also facilitating knowledge synthesis. And what's nice for students as well is that it's moving away from rote memorization. You don't necessarily have to remember everything by heart. And this is therefore giving a more active role to the students. And concept maps, they are also helpful for assessing students because this can help to determine the logical reasoning of students, but it also requires usually a feedback from the evaluator so that there is like a co-creation of this concept map. That's actually what I will do during this seminar. So I will give you feedback on your concept map and then you can work on it again. So the concept map is characterized by its structure and by its content, and the students, they can have more or less freedom on both aspects. So here on the x-axis is the freedom of structure, and on the y-axis is the freedom of content. So from left to right for the freedom of structure, it's less to more freedom, and from the freedom of content, it's from less to more, from the bottom to the top. So obviously, if your teachers gives you no condition, you are absolutely maximally free in the freedom of structure and the freedom of content. It will be on the top right corner here. And if you just have to memorize a map, concept map, you will be on the bottom left corner, right? So you will have no freedom for structure and no freedom for content. You will just have to remember it and to repeat it, which is actually a bit not the original intent of using a concept map. That said, the concept map is easier to evaluate for the teacher the more we go towards the bottom left of this figure, but it's also more helpful for the student when we go on the top right corner of this figure. So in your concept map that you will have to give for this seminar, I will give you a root concept, which will be collective behavior and health, a focus question, and a list of concepts. So to build your concept map, you can use a variety of tools, for example, pen and paper. So you will draw your concept map on a piece of paper, then afterwards you will take a picture and send it to me. You can also build your concept map in PowerPoint or in another general software. You can use also dedicated software, for example, CMap tools. But the main focus is actually not on the tool you use, but more on how you organize your map. And this is actually what we will do also during this seminar, Collective Behavior and Health, because you will be partly evaluated with a concept map. Why do I focus on concept map as an evaluation tool? Because actually they are effective way to learn. And here are the results of a meta-analysis of 142 independent effect sizes, representing more than 11,000 participants. So on this figure, you can see the effect of using a concept map compared to other alternatives of learning. On the y-axis is the effect size. If it's positive, so above the black line, then the concept map is more efficient than the alternative. And if it's negative, so below the black line, then the alternative will be more efficient than the concept map. We can see that the main advantage of using a concept map is compared if you only just go to a lecture or a discussion and you just listen to it. So it will be the one on the rightmost part of the graph. So there, using a concept map is much better than just listening to a discussion or a lecture. Using a concept map is still also better than studying text, constructing text yourself. So if you write something, constructing or studying lists, and also constructing or studying outlines or other aspects of a way to learn. So concept maps are very efficient compared to other learning tools. They're also more efficient the more you use them. So if you use them for less than 1 week, it still has an effect, but it's not as high if you use it for 1 month or more than 1 month. And finally, if you construct the concept map, it's more interesting for you because it will have a larger effect than if you just study it. So that's what is represented here on the right. So to make things a bit more concrete, I created here a concept map about music. So because it's about music, I put music in the center. And then in green, there are like the first level concepts that I identified. And they are composed of genres of music, of musicians, so people who are doing the music, and listeners, so people who are listening to the music. So that will be like the 3 main categories that I related to music. And then each of these sub-levels, they are themselves related to other concepts that are, for example, if they are orange, they are second level concepts, and if they are red, they will be third level concepts. So the genres of music, for example, they can be characterized by their evolution, and also there is a link to culture. The genres of music, for example, could be metal music, classical music, hip-hop music. And I could even give more specific examples of what I mean by metal. So, for example, I could say this is a genre that is represented by doom metal, heavy metal, thrash metal, and so on. And then if I focus on the musicians, I can relate the musicians to the instruments they play, to the bands in which they play, or to the orchestras in which they play. And so again, for instruments, I can give some examples. Either you can play the guitar or the piano. And generally, if you play an instrument, you went to a music school. And so that's why it's also represented as a third level concept. So for bands, I can also give examples of bands that I know. So Anathema, for example, Thin Lizzy, Europe. And musicians can also be in orchestras. So now if we focus on the listeners, they could either be fans of the musicians, for example, or they could also be music critics, right? So there are different roles of these listeners. And fans, they could also be organized in fan clubs. And then if I want to link some different levels between them, I can also represent the interface between both. So I do that by putting in purple, for example, the streaming platforms, which are between the listeners and the musicians. So if the musicians want to offer their music easily, they can offer it to over a streaming platform, and listeners can just log into this streaming platform and listen to the music. Listeners and musicians, they could also go to concerts, either with orchestras and with bands. So that's an example of can be done with a concept map about music. So here are the references that I used to make this video. And you can access all of them by copying their DOI on the internet if you are interested. So I hope that you understood that concept map can be useful for you and that they are also fun to build. When you are building them for the seminar, I would like you to focus on the completeness of your concept, the meaning that you put with your links, and also the logic of the structure that you present. And I wish you all the best and have fun. Bye!